Welcome. I'm Eric Fleming, host of A Moment with Eric Fleming, the podcast of our time. I want to personally thank you for listening to the podcast. If you like what you're hearing, then I need you to do a few things. First, I need subscribers. I'm on Patreon at patreon.com/A Moment with Eric Fleming. Your subscription allows an independent podcaster like me the freedom to speak truth to power and to expand and improve the show. Second, leave a 5-star review for the podcast on the streaming service you listen to it. That will help the podcast tremendously. Third, go to the website, momenteric.com. There you can subscribe to the podcast, leave reviews and comments, listen to past episodes, and even learn a little bit about your host. Lastly, don't keep this a secret like it's your own personal guilty pleasure. Tell someone else about the podcast. Encourage others to listen to the podcast and share the podcast on your social media platforms because it is time to make this moment a movement. Thanks in advance for supporting the podcast of our time. I hope you enjoy this episode as well. Hello, and welcome to the Moment with Eric Fleming. I am your host, Eric Fleming. And today, ladies and gentlemen, for the first time in a long time, this is going to be a hot mic episode. Yes, no guests. It's just going to be me. And I guess, it worked out pretty good because there's some things I need to talk about. A couple of things, anyway, in the time that I have. So, before we get into all of that, let's start off with a moment of news with Grace G.
Thanks, Eric. President Biden announced a new program to provide a path to citizenship for undocumented immigrants married to U.S. citizens. The U.S. Supreme Court ruled 6-3 against a federal ban on bump stock devices. Maryland Governor Wes Moore pardoned over 175,000 low-level marijuana convictions. The 6th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals blocked the Biden administration's directive allowing transgender students to use facilities and join sports teams. Several federal judges blocked U.S. Department of Education protections for LGBTQ students against discrimination in 10 states. Anderson Lee Aldrich, the convicted shooter of a 2022 attack at a Colorado gay nightclub, pled guilty to federal hate crime and gun charges. U.S. Catholic bishops apologized to Native Americans for past trauma and adopted new guidelines for ministry. The U.S. House Ethics Committee expanded its investigation into Representative Matt Gaetz to include potential obstruction of the inquiry. Louisiana Governor Jeff Landry signed a bill mandating the display of the Ten Commandments in all public school classrooms. The Los Angeles Unified School District Board of Education voted to ban smartphones for its 429,000 students. Crews began demolishing the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School building in Parkland, Florida, where 17 people were killed in a 2018 shooting. An armed man injured 9 people at a water park near Detroit before fatally shooting himself. Massachusetts' 911 system experienced an hour-long outage during a severe heat wave. A CDC report from the 2022 National Health Interview Survey reveals 4% of U.S. adults aged 65 and over have been diagnosed with dementia. And Baseball Hall of Famer Willie Mays died at the age of 93. I am Grace G., and this has been A Moment of News.
All right. Thank you, Grace, for that moment of news. And now to start off this hot mic episode, let me take one of those headlines that Grace read. and go into it a little deeper. This comes from Reuters, where I get most of my news. And the headline is Louisiana requires display of 10 commandments in all classrooms. Louisiana Governor Jeff Landry on Wednesday signed into law a bill that makes the state the only one in the country to require the displaying of the 10 commandments in every public school classroom. The American Civil Liberties Union immediately announced it would sue to block the law, saying it violates the constitutional separation of church and state and a U.S. Supreme Court ruling. Landry signed the bill along with a package of others he said were designed to expand faith in public schools. If you want to respect the rule of law, you've got to start from the original lawgiver, which was Moses, Landry said at the signing ceremony. In the Christian and Jewish faiths, God revealed the 10 Commandments to Hebrew prophet Moses. Other measures would authorize the hiring of chaplains in schools, strict teachers from mentoring sexual orientation or gender identity, and prevent schools from using transgender students' preferred name or pronouns unless granted permission by parents. Landry also signed bills that would expand tutoring for underperforming students, help improve math skills, and impose fewer curriculum mandates on teachers. Civil rights group, ACLU, and its Louisiana chapter, along with Americans United for Separation of Church and State and the Freedom for Religion Foundation, announced they would file a lawsuit to challenge the law that requires a specific text of the 10 Commandments be prominently displayed in all classrooms. No other state has such a law, the group said in a statement. Politicians have no business imposing their preferred religious doctrine on students and families in public schools, the statement said. The First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution prohibits government from the establishment of religion, and in 1980, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in Stone v. Graham that a Kentucky law on posting of the 10 Commandments in school was unconstitutional. Now, before I tear into Landry and his ilk, I am glad that the Louisiana legislature at least passed something dealing with tutoring and did something on paper to try to improve math skills. But posting the 10 Commandments in a public school is not going to improve the lives of these children, especially since Louisiana is considered one of the poorest states in the United States. It has been ranked as the most dangerous state to live in the United States. There is literally a part of Louisiana that stretches from Baton Rouge to New Orleans that they refer to as Cancer Alley. Because of the number of factories that are there, and exacerbated by the poverty there, where people are not getting the health care that they need because, for the most part, they can't afford it. But your most important thing, and the year before this, there's one particular legislator that introduced the legislation for the 10 Commandments, and this same woman introduced legislation the year before to mandate that in God we trust be put in every classroom. So in 2025, teachers may not have supplies. Now, they did approve a stipend for teachers. And that stipend would be an additional $2,000 to whatever they make. $2,000. So, the state of Louisiana passed legislation dealing with math, trying to improve math skills, passed legislation to try to help folks get tutoring. They passed an additional $2,000 per teacher stipend. But in 2025, it's going to be mandated that every classroom has "In God We Trust" and the Ten Commandments in the room. And when asked about the constitutionality of this proposed legislation, Governor Landry said, "I look forward to being sued." I served in the legislature from 1999 to 2008 in Mississippi. During that time, a group called the American Family Association, which is based in Tupelo. And you've probably heard me tell this story before, but I think it's relevant to tell it again. This group pushed, well, what they did the first year to kind of get us set up for it was they gave each member a poster that was framed, real nice frame, and it said "In God We Trust" on it. And, just gave it to us as a gift. And I'm sure a lot of members put that in their office or at their home somewhere. The next year, they came back with legislation to say that every classroom in the state of Mississippi shall display "In God We Trust" in the classroom. I tried to amend that law, well, the bill at the time, and I wanted to change the word "shall" to "may." And the argument I made was not about constitutionality, because the speaker was like, "Are you really going to talk 10 minutes about the constitutionality?" I said, "No, Mr. Speaker, but just watch." So what I did was I went and found my framed "In God We Trust" poster, brought that to the Capitol, and then I got a dollar bill. And in my remarks, I basically stated that, reminded everybody that the American Family Association gave us these nice plaques "In God We Trust." And this is basically what they're demanding that every classroom has. But then I pulled out my dollar bill and I said, this dollar bill also says on the back, "In God We Trust." The question I have is, how many of these dollar bills are going to be used to put up these posters? And I pointed out that there was no appropriation in the Department of Education budget for these posters. So I made the argument that this is what we call an unfunded mandate. And every Republican in the room panicked, because the conservative viewpoint has always been, if we're going to implement these programs, we got to have the money. And anything that they they thought would benefit poor children or black children or brown children or whatever, that's a question they would ask. And that's the label they would put on it if it wasn't in the appropriation. Excuse me, for the Department of Education, they would say it was an unfunded mandate. So I threw it back at them and said this was an unfunded mandate. Well, like I said, the Republicans panicked, and even though my amendment was defeated, they got on the phone with the American Family Association, and literally by the time I got through speaking, a number of the Republicans surrounded me on the floor. And they said that we have a commitment to deal with your concern. What they had done was they got the American Family Association to donate all the posters. So however many classrooms in the state of Mississippi, the American Family Association was to print enough of those posters and give them to the schools for free. That was one. And then two, if the schools decided that they wanted to have them framed, that would be responsible of local business people to donate the cost of framing those posters to that school district. In other words, I made them put their money where their mouth was. So the question I had in listening to the stories, and no report, not Reuters, not MSNBC, not Fox, not CNN, nobody said how much money was put into the Department of Education budget in the state of Louisiana to pay for the 10 Commandments to be posted at every school. As far as I know, not a dime. So that means that every school district has to come up with the money to get these 10 Commandment posters and post them in every classroom, in addition to the In God We Trust posters. Right? So they got 2 posters that they have to put up. Now, there's no requirement that every high school classroom has the periodic table. There's no requirement that every classroom has to display the U.S. Constitution. There's no requirement in the state of Louisiana that the Louisiana Constitution has to be in public display. Or at the very least, the Bill of Rights for the U.S. Constitution or the Louisiana Constitution. But the 10 Commandments, that has to be displayed. So let's deal with some facts, right? So it was mentioned in that Reuters that there was a case in 1980 where the state of Kentucky wanted to do the same thing. And the U.S. Supreme Court at that time said, no, that's not going to happen. That's a violation of the First Amendment. That's imposing religion. That's government imposing religion. And public school districts are government entities. In many states, if not all states, they have taxation power. You pay taxes to your county government. Some places you pay city taxes, and you pay taxes to the state, pay taxes to the federal government, and in most jurisdictions you pay taxes to the school district. that comes out of your property tax. So it's a government entity. And here we have a government entity imposing religion. Now, I'm a Christian, so I'm not opposed to the Ten Commandments. I have tried and failed to live up to each one of those. Done pretty good on the overwhelming majority of them. So the concept of the Ten Commandments is not my issue. But there's two things that bother me. One, I've already explained in detail that you want people who are not Christian, some people who don't believe in a God at all, to pay for your belief that the Ten Commandments will improve the lives of the students. And my question is, if their lives haven't been improved by the church that they attend on Sundays, and maybe for a lot of them on Wednesday evenings in Bible study, what makes you think that the Ten Commandments is going to help them during school? That's one. Two, why is it so important that you push this on everybody? Jesus said, and I'm paraphrasing, but Jesus said, those of you who get on street corners and try to call yourself evangelizing or stand up to express your faith, you don't improve your chance to go to heaven that way. People that pray in the privacy of their own home, in their closet, I think was the actual word that he used, have a better chance of getting to heaven than you do, who's out here trying to force people. Because we're taught in our faith that we're supposed to come to God at our own free will. We're not supposed to be coerced. We're supposed to be, our commission is to tell the story of the good news. That's what the gospel is. And then people are supposed to take that good news and make their own decision. People who are Christian nationalists don't get that. They miss that part in Matthew. I think it's Matthew 28:28. I think they missed that altogether. What they want to do is homogenize as many people as they can. They want to browbeat their faith into discussion. They want to revise history because Governor Landry, and he was corrected to a certain degree by a lady that was sitting next to him after he made his statement about the foundation, but she corrected him a different way. She said that actually the commandments came from God. Moses just delivered them, and he kind of said, yeah, that's right, on an open mic. But the reality is that the first laws were passed, were the Code of Hammurabi. It's the first recorded set of laws in human civilization. That was before the Ten Commandments. And the purpose of the Ten Commandments was God was displeased with the idolatry and the ingratitude that the Hebrews showed after he had Moses lead them out of captivity from Egypt. So it seems to me that the people that need the Ten Commandments are the people who are pushing the Ten Commandments, because what we're seeing now, especially in the conservative movement and the Republican Party, is the ultimate form of idolatry, right? We're not going to have a party platform. We just go with what Donald Trump says. There literally at meetings have been golden statues of Donald Trump where people have, for lack of a better word, worshipped at, paid homage to. And there's nothing in the Ten Commandments that will cure cancer in Cancer Alley. There's nothing in the Ten Commandments that will raise math scores or reading comprehension levels or make sure that teachers get paid what they're worth without having to have an additional stipend. There's nothing in the Ten Commandments that will improve the quality of life other than in a spiritual sense for those who believe, for the majority of the citizens in the state of Louisiana. We know, those of us who are of the faith, we know that all things are possible through him that strengthens us. And so in our lives, our private lives, we turn to God for guidance. The majority of us do not try to impose our will on our fellow citizens. The whole concept of the United States was to get away from this form of religious persecution. There were people who did not want to be members of the Anglican, which we call the Episcopalian Church in England. So they decided to set up colonies in the New World. There are those who are Catholic, who have kind of a variation of the Ten Commandments. And there are people who are Muslim, who are Buddhist, who are agnostic, who are atheist, who don't subscribe to that. They have their own set of rules and moral codes, if you will, to follow. So not only is posting the Ten Commandments in public schools unconstitutional, it's not even patriotic. It defies the very spirit of independence that the original settlers of the colonies sought. Now, whether they ascribe to the Ten Commandments in their own particular way, it's a whole nother conversation. But the whole purpose was that they did not want the government to tell them how to pray. They didn't want the government to tell them how to worship. And contrary to the belief of these fanatics, the Ten Commandments was not the inspiration for the Bill of Rights or the U.S. Constitution. It was things like the Magna Carta, which stressed individual rights. American democracy is the most unique democracy on the planet. And it was designed to be different because of the experience that these Europeans had dealt with in their previous countries. It is a symbol that even through all of the racism and all of the economic ebbs and flows, still appears to the world as a place of hope and opportunity. And that's why people from all over the world seek to come here, whether to visit, to study, or to live. And there are a group of folks who don't get that. They are blinded by their zealousness. They are blinded by their greed. They are blinded by their covetedness. That they don't get it, and then they push this type of legislation. If you want the Ten Commandments and in God we trust and all this stuff displayed in your crib, knock yourself out. You have that right to do that. But don't force it on anybody else. And the hypocrisy and the dichotomy is psychotic. Because you don't want the government to tell you to wear a mask. But you want the government to force the Ten Commandments on everybody. You want the government to force women to have children. You don't want the government to tell you to stop the pollution that creates Cancer Alley. And you don't want the government to regulate finances. These same people who are pushing the Ten Commandments are also saying that credit card companies and banks have the right to charge whatever they want in fees. President Biden is trying to limit how much they can do. And these folks, these Bible-thumping folks said, no, as a matter of fact, we love it. That's what one congressman literally said, that people love paying fees. But you turn right around and campaign to say people are upset about eggs costing more than $3. I don't want my eggs to cost more than $3. I don't want my gas to cost more than $3, but I'll pay $34 for a bank fee. I'll do that. That's why I use the word psychotic. That's why I use the word insane. Because it's not based on logic, it's based on greed. It's based on covetousness. It's not based biblically. Just remember that most of the folks that are pushing these quote unquote Christian nationalist tenets are not coming from God. As somebody who is a practitioner of the Christian faith, I can say that. They're not. It is coming from an invidious, evil place masquerading as faith. We don't need fanatics in government. We need leaders. We need people to lead the masses, not the masses leading them. You're supposed to represent the interests of the masses. But if you're going to be the leader, then you have to dictate the terms. We literally have a political party that doesn't understand that. We want to cater to the will of the people. We want to address their concerns. And when politicians like me go out and campaign, we're seeking to get the majority approval based off of the concerns that we have heard and the ideas that we are presenting to help alleviate those problems, to come up with solutions. But we're not supposed to be guided by conspiracy theories. We're supposed to be guided by facts. Not supposed to be guided by zealotness. Zealot behavior. We're supposed to be guided by intelligence, wisdom. That's what people look for in leaders, wisdom. I don't know when this nightmare is going to end or when it is going to be contained, but it has to be soon. Because if this country is going to move forward and to be, as the Bible says, a light, a shining light on the hill, right? A shining city on the hill, then it has to lead by example, not by foolishness, not by hypocrisy. Not by fanaticism. It may be too late for the state of Louisiana. It may be too late for Mississippi or some other southern states. But it's not too late for the rest of the nation. And I'm hoping that in those states where hope may seem lost, that there are enough people with courage to fight back. And the best way to fight back is to vote. All right. Let me catch y'all on the other side. Hello, this is Eric Fleming, host of A Moment with Eric Fleming, and I need your help. We have an opportunity to cover the Democratic National Convention in Chicago this August, but I need to raise some money. So I need you to go to GoFundMe.com/help a moment with Eric Fleming broadcast from DNC 2024. That's GoFundMe.com, help a moment with Eric Fleming broadcast from DNC 2024. Thank you so much. All right, we're back. So I got one thing off my chest. Let me get this other thing off my chest. And for lack of a better term, y'all heard of the movie Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. Let me talk about Donald Trump and his Chocolate City tour. Right? And more specifically, his quote-unquote appeal to black voters. most of us who understand politics know that Donald Trump is not going to get the majority of the black vote. The black vote in America has been primarily, since the 1960s, Democratic. And the main factors of that was the efforts of civil rights activists in the South to infiltrate the Democratic Party of the South at that time, which was implementing Jim Crow. And from the time Fannie Lou Hamer gave her speech on behalf of the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party delegation at that convention in Atlantic City, black folks have not only shifted their vote to the Democratic Party, but they've taken over leadership. There actually is a black man who is chair of the Democratic National Committee now from a southern state, South Carolina. There's even been a black man to become president of the United States as a Democrat. And now there is a black woman sitting as vice president as a Democrat. It was Democratic presidents who put people like Robert Weaver in the cabinet, Patricia Harris in the cabinet, Ron Brown in the cabinet, Thurgood Marshall on the Supreme Court. It was Democrats who started pushing for and protecting the rights gained already and pushing for new rights for African Americans, Afro Americans, Coolabons in America, black folks, however you want to be identified. It's been the Democratic Party. Now, you hear a lot from the Republican side say the Democrat Party, and my response has always been that Democrat Party seems pretty evil. I'm a member of the Democratic Party. And the Democratic Party of the United States has done everything within its power to try to make things better, utilizing the power of government to make it so, whether it's through laws, whether it's through appropriations, and in some cases, the courts. A lot of the early civil rights leaders were Republican because of the history that the Republicans were the party of Lincoln. Lincoln was considered a great emancipator. If you learned anything on Juneteenth, you know that the Emancipation Proclamation was limited to states that had slaves, and it wasn't really enforced, although if slaves managed to get away, they were protected because the Union was going to keep them and not enact the Fugitive Slave Act, and even would encourage them to enlist to fight for everybody else's freedom. And 2 years later, on June 19th, 1865, a group of slaves finally found out that this Emancipation Proclamation existed. And also during that time, there was a general named Sherman who basically, through a field order, I think it was field order number 15, granted land, which, if those black folks had kept it, or were allowed to keep it, be worth $640 billion because it was basically from the coastline from South Carolina to Florida. Waterfront property. $640 billion. So hopefully during Juneteenth you learned all about that. What the first thing I want to address is these black folks who want to support Donald Trump. Now here's my thing. If you want to support Donald Trump and you're black, knock yourself out. Think it's cutting off your nose to spite your face. But in America, you have that right to support who you want. But be factual, right? Understand that the Republican Party now is not the Republican Party of Abraham Lincoln or Charles Sumter. It is not that Republican Party anymore. It's not even the party of Everett Dirksen or John Lindsay or Nelson Rockefeller. It's not even the party of Richard Nixon or Gerald Ford or Ronald Reagan. This is the Republican Party that is more like Ross Barnett and George Wallace, Theodore Bilbo, Richard Russell, Strom Thurmond, Jesse Helms. That's the Republican Party now. So if you're black and you want to associate it with the legacy of those people, knock yourself out. Right? Edward Brooke would be considered a liberal or a rhino in Massachusetts now. Oscar the Priest would be considered a liberal or rhino in Illinois now, compared to the Republican parties that exist today. Blanche K. Bruce or Hiram Revels. Even Martin Luther King would be considered rhinos in this modern day Republican Party. They would not be considered conservatives. They would not be a part of MAGA. They would not be down with the grift. Right? Times have changed. The Democratic Party in the South now looks more like black folk. So much so that I literally saw it happen. I literally ran against a guy who, when he first got involved in politics, was a Southern Democrat. And he switched over to the Republican Party as it became more appealing to those Dixiecrats from back in the day. So when you hear a black person get on social media, whether it's TikTok, X, Facebook, whatever, and say, oh, the Democrats were the Jim Crow party. They were. And then all those folks by 1979, 1980, when Ronald Reagan was running for president and coming to the Neshoba County Fair in Mississippi and saying states' rights forever, echoing Barry Goldwater's appeal in 1964, 60 years ago, all that changed. And all those folks came to the Republican Party. And that was started by Richard Nixon and what we call the Southern Strategy. If you don't believe it, look it up. It's documented. The Lee Atwaters, the Roger Ailes, all these guys cut their teeth. Ed Rollins, all these guys cut their teeth implementing the Southern Strategy, the conversion of taking Southern Dixiecrats and bringing them over into the Republican Party, which led to the Tea Party, which leads to MAGA. So the Republican Party that you're affiliated with is an extension of the Dixiecrats you say that black folks shouldn't vote for. And you're right, black folks shouldn't vote for Dixiecrats. That's why they shouldn't vote for Republicans, because all the Dixiecrats are now Republicans. There are black Republicans who still follow the tradition of John Lindsay and Nelson Rockefeller and Gerald Ford. God bless you. Keep up the good fight. Try to get those Dixiecrats out of your party so you can get back to relevancy. But as long as those fanatics, those Christian nationalists, and you know, remember the Klan based themselves as a religious organization. That's why they burn crosses, right? The White Knights. Yes, there's a tie-in with the Ten Commandments being displayed in schools and racism. And to get back to that point, to add on to it, that's why they felt, the Europeans felt they could carve up Africa. That's why, they tried to convert the natives here in North America to Christianity and stuff because they felt they were heathens. And it's that same mentality. That dictates them trying to inflict religion on the masses because they feel we need it. That's why they're against abortion. Not because of some great biblical concern, but because they're trying to, Theodore Roosevelt said it was genocide to white people. But you've heard me say that before. Anyway, back to you black folks that are supporting this Chocolate City tour of Donald Trump. The church in Detroit has gotten a lot of the 180 church and its pastor, who obviously had a Damascus Road experience, who was leading a life of crime. He found God, and now he's a minister. And he has set up a church. But for some reason, he feels that Donald Trump is the answer to his questions. Now, I'm not the shadow. I don't know what's in the heart of that pastor or any human being for that matter. But I'm looking at actions. And when I look at legitimate rap artists or other celebrities who are lining up that way, if I'm in a certain income tax bracket, I'm looking for people that are talking about, I ain't got to pay that many taxes, right? Although most Americans don't like taxes, the richer you are, the less you like them, it seems. And so I get it. If you make X amount of dollars, you want to vote conservative. If you're one of the mega rich people in America, you want it. But for those of us who are working paycheck to paycheck, those of us who are just getting by with a little savings, especially in the black community, that's not the answer. We want people who are trying to alleviate debt, like student loans, for example, either through forgiveness programs or putting more money in black colleges where tuitions don't have to be so high for the group of people they're trying to get in to give them a college education. Right? We want a government that makes sure that our roads and our bridges are safe. and in the process, creating jobs for us to do that kind of work. We want to make sure that our schools are safe. That want to put people in positions of authority in law enforcement that makes the streets safe, not just to stop criminals, but also to not terrorize our communities. Because you can get rid of a criminal element without terrorizing every black person that lives in the community you're supposed to serve and protect. You can't do that. That's what most black people want. There's a group of us who feel that the government owes us some money in the form of reparations, repairing the damage that they systematically have inflicted on us, whether it was the actual peculiar institution of slavery or the Jim Crow that followed. The deconstruction, right? That is a legitimate claim. When you look at economic indicators, again, for every $100 a black family has $5. There's some historical damage attached to that. Whether it was redlining programs, whether it was legislation that was supposed to help all veterans but only help the white ones get housing and jobs and all that stuff. Damage was done. And it was generational. And we want to support people who are trying to fix it, not continue to take advantage of it. And most black people that vote see the Democratic Party as the party that is trying to repair the damage. Now, since the majority of people in the political process, the majority of the population in this country is white, it's not going to be any unanimity as far as everything the black community wants. You got white Democrats who are not down with reparations. That's a fact. They're not necessarily racist, but they're not necessarily progressive either. But I know that I can approach them and say, hey, look, this is what we need. How can we get there? And have a meaningful dialogue. Because the other party will not have the meaningful dialogue. They won't even have a platform, so you don't even know what they stand for. Right? The beauty of these conventions, and I'll kind of get to that in a moment. The beauty of these conventions is that even though the candidates pretty much are determined, the platform that the candidates run on, whether it's for president or for the House of Representatives or the Senate, the national platform is what's determined at these conventions. On the Democratic side, it's a chance for people who are delegates to push for an agenda that's inclusive of black people. On the Republican side, they don't have a platform. So those black folks that are on the Republican side don't have any say so other than pledging fealty to their nominee. That's it. So I'd rather be affiliated with a political party that at least gives me voice than one that just wants me to be loyal. Because there are some people that ask the question, what have Democrats done and da 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 and this, that, the other, and it's like a lot more than the other side. Because we are in a position based on our votes and based on people that we elect to get into certain positions like the House of Representatives and even the U.S. Senate and even in the White House, where our concerns are at least heard. And some of them are addressed. Took a lot of meetings from Martin Luther King and Whitney Young and Roy Wilkins, all them guys, to get Lyndon Johnson to go all in on both the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, understanding the repercussions of that politically. But it worked. And now we need more people like that in positions to get the George Floyd Police Reform Act passed, to get the John Lewis Voting Rights Act passed. So we got to get people in, not only in the White House, that are sympathetic to our cause, but in the House of Representatives and the United States Senate. Now, I started off by saying that the majority of the black vote is going to go to the Democrat candidates. The Republicans understand that. All they're trying to do is get enough of the black vote to swing their way, right? We used to make the argument in Mississippi that if 25% of the white vote went with the Democratic candidate, the Democrat would win, whether it was governor, U.S. Senate, whatever. They would win. Based on the black turnout, whether it was anywhere from 40% to 80%. If 25% of the white vote that turned out voted for the Democratic candidate, we would win. The Republicans are trying to do the same thing. If they can get 25% of the vote or higher in the black community, they win nationwide and in their respective locales. That's all they're trying to do. They're trying to get enough black votes to switch over so that the votes that they figure they got in the bank, they show up, they'll win. Now, in these gerrymandered districts and all that stuff, it's not fair, so it doesn't matter. They've got more than enough votes where if every black person voted against them, they'd win. And you really would need an incredible high percentage, like close to 50% of the white vote, to run them out. Which could happen if white women vote against Republicans. That's a whole other show. What I want black folks to understand is that you're not going to be happy with white people making decisions about black folks' quality of life, because they're not going to address everything. Only we are going to do that, right? But since we don't have black candidates in every race, nor do we have any state where we make up 50 to 55% of the state's voting age population, There are going to be white folks that we're going to have to trust and empower with our vote to do what needs to be done. I was told once that the speeches I was giving may resonate with black people, but they wouldn't resonate with white folks. They were wrong. I didn't win the election, but I got more votes than they thought because white folks voted for me. Not a whole lot, but I got them because what I was saying resonated with them, right? When you talk about hope, when you talk about progress, when you talk about a vision, human beings respond to that regardless of their ethnic background because we're wired that way. When we talk about independence, we're wired that way. But we are also wired to be scared shitless. And the Republicans tap into that. But we have been always taught that hope triumphs over fear. And if you can overcome your fears, you can achieve great things. Courage is not just being brave, it's being able to overcome fear. And there's a guy that's on YouTube who basically makes the argument that black conservatives are lazy. I would agree with that premise because the easy thing to do is to cater to fear. That's the easy human emotion. That's what gets our instincts going is fear. In comic books like the Spidey sense and all that kind of stuff. That's fear. But believing that you can overcome obstacles, dealing with day-to-day challenges, making it to the next day, making it to the next week, making it to the next month, making it to the next year. That's hope. And when you look back on a life based on hope, you look back at the fears that you had and you laugh. Why was I scared? Look at where I am. And that is really where the power of our vote comes in as black people. It is our hope. It is our tool for progress. It is our weapon against fear. And those black folks who are just looking for money, those black folks who are just looking for acceptance, those black folks who want to succumb to fear and hate and anger, you'll get what you pay for. Your laziness will be rewarded. And the reward will be inactivity toward your cause, more oppression, and more rhetoric that is divisive and racist. That's your reward. For those of us who believe in hope, or espouse hope, or embrace hope, our reward will be progress. Our reward will be the eroding of these barriers and these attitudes. Technology has helped a lot. There's no law about that. It just is what it is. If I can pick up a phone and talk to somebody in a whole nother country, doesn't cost me anything. I can find out information with press of a button or a touchscreen. That helps because the more information we have, the better we are geared toward progress. So, when you see Donald Trump and those black folks who are supporting him try to convey this message, and I mean, if you're going to convey the message, put some effort into it. The ultimate act of laziness is to say you have a black church, but you stick white faces in there to create a crowd. That's lazy. I don't care if you only have 8 black people in there. If your whole goal is to get black voters, then you've got those 8. If your whole dais is black people and your audience is white people, that doesn't get the black vote. Just as a point of reference. Even if you only had 8 black people in there, that's 8 black people you didn't have. So if you really want to get the black vote, get it. And talk about things that black folks want to talk about. Don't just say, I got black friends, vote for me. That's not going to cut it. You got white folks wearing blacks for Trump t-shirts, for crying out loud. Put some effort into it. If you're trying to get 25% or higher of the black vote, you've got to do better than that. Because the Democratic Party has put that effort into it. And they put that effort into it because we forced the conversation, like Fannie Lou Hamer. We forced the conversation so that every Democrat, not just the ones in the North, but the ones in the South, relate to us. And those folks who didn't want to relate to us, the Republicans let them in. So if we really want to end the legacy of Jim Crow, then we don't vote for Republicans. If we really want to end racism in our public policy, we don't vote for Republicans. That's what the agenda for black people should be until the Republican Party starts addressing. If Byron Donalds was Fannie Lou Hamer, we'd be having a whole different discussion. If Tim Scott was Fannie Lou Hamer, we'd be having a whole different discussion. We have had black folks agree to oppression before. That's happened. We've managed to overcome that. And we are still moving forward. In this election, regardless of how you feel about democracy, regardless of how you feel about Supreme Court justices and all that, which all ties into the big picture. If your motivation is to get more progress for black people, then you don't have any options other than Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. You don't. I wish Cornel West had an agenda and the money to expose it, but he doesn't. I wish there was a black candidate that we could galvanize around that addresses our issues and our concerns 100%. Some of them ran in local races. And achieved nominations and secured positions, but a lot of them didn't. That's part of the process. But their voices were out there, and that's a good thing. You know, people have criticized this one brother, I guess he was in South Carolina, who challenged Clyburn. Why? He wanted to bring reparations to the table. He did that. So much so that there's been national discussion about it, along with some others in some key races. But that one brother in particular, because they were like, well, he's going against a black guy. Well, this black guy's been in office for a long time. And his challenge to him was he wasn't addressing an issue that black people need to discuss. Now that person is discussing that issue because that brother ran in that race. That's how the process works. If you have black candidates in the Republican Party pushing black issues, different discussion. That's our goal. Again, my dream is to one day have a black man or woman as the Democratic nominee for president and a black man or woman as the Republican nominee for president. And they got to those positions addressing issues that would have a positive impact on black folks. Now, whatever helps black people is going to help other folks too. But that's my dream. So, for those who are angry or disparaging about seeing black folks line up with Donald Trump, just keep it pushing. Don't even worry about that. You're always going to have black folks who are going to act contrarian when it comes to their political beliefs. It's just how it is. We're not supposed to be monolithic in thought other than looking out for the best interests of black people. There's different ways to get there. But I'd rather go with people that actually say, this is what I plan to do, instead of the alternative is just vote for that guy. All right. Let me catch y'all on the other side. All right, so we're back. So let me just close out real quick. Thank y'all for listening. I just want to close out real quick by making another appeal. As you know, we've started a GoFundMe, and you will hear in every episode at least a 30-second appeal to raise money for the podcast to be at the Democratic National Convention in Chicago in August. The podcast was approved as far as press credentials, and it's estimated that the cost is, travel and accommodations, wherever other expenses are needed during that week, around $3,500. As of this recording, we've knocked out 100 of that, and we're just trying to ask y'all. Well, I'm asking for all of you all who follow me on social media, who listen to the podcast, to contribute. And like I said, the plan is to have episodes on Patreon for free and have a special episode with some key people that I'll get a chance to interview while at the convention. I've put in my list of people that I want to interview, and we'll see how many of those are actually granted. The quote-unquote big attractions will be in the special episode, and other interviews along with daily reports of what's going on will be on the Patreon. So that's the plan. But I need y'all's help. So, in the 30-second appeal, I give the whole GoFundMe address. But if that's too much to try to retain, or you have to stop, pause, write down, the best way to do is go to www.momenteric.com. Just go to the podcast website. There's a link to the GoFundMe page. There's a link to all the episodes and anything else. If you want to learn more about the podcast, if it's your first time listening, the website has all that. It has links to all the guests that's been on, or most of the guests. So, you'll get to learn more about this podcast. But again, just go to www.momenteric.com and give what you can. And I would greatly, greatly appreciate it. All right, guys. Until next time.